the slow roads of Rome, post, travel, and the endless miles of empire. Stone by stone, building the Roman road network. When you picture the Roman Empire, you may imagine shining marble forums, legionaries in armor, or amphitheaters filled with spectators. Yet, the true backbone of Rome was something quieter, slower, and far less dramatic: its roads. Mile after mile, stone after stone, they stretched across continents. To march an army, to carry tax records, to deliver letters, to move grain from fields to cities, all depended on this network. In this first section, we will walk slowly through the making of these roads, not in the hurried stride of a general, but in the steady rhythm of laborers setting stones. The construction of Roman roads was neither glamorous nor quick. It was work measured in seasons, in back-breaking hours, in layers of earth and stone carefully fitted together. And though most travelers barely considered the effort beneath their feet, the roads themselves were monuments to persistence. The idea of Roman roads. Before Rome rose, roads in much of Europe and the Mediterranean were uneven dirt tracks. Seasonal rains could turn them into mud, while dry months left them dusty and rutted. Travel was difficult, slow, and sometimes impossible. The Romans, determined to knit their territories together, made the building of durable, permanent roads a matter of state. The phrase Vie Romani, Roman roads, came to mean order, permanence, and imperial reach. A saying emerged: all roads lead to Rome. It was more than metaphor. The roads really did radiate outward from the capital like the spokes of a great wheel, all converging at the Miliarium Aureum, the golden milestone in the Roman Forum. Surveyors and the first lines. Every road began not with stone, but with surveyors. Using simple tools like the groma, a cross-shaped device for sighting straight lines, they laid out paths across valleys, hills, and plains. The goal was not the easiest route, but the most direct. Where possible, Roman roads cut straight lines through the landscape, even if that meant carving into hillsides or spanning rivers. For villages and farmers, this must have been disorienting. A path they had followed for generations might suddenly be replaced by a new line drawn with no regard for old boundaries. But Rome valued efficiency. The shortest distance between 2 points became not just a principle of geometry, but a principle of empire. Layers beneath the traveler's feet. The durability of Roman roads lay in their construction. Far from simple paving, they were layered carefully, each stratum designed to support weight and shed water. The process could involve the statumen, a foundation of large stones laid directly onto leveled earth. The rudis, a layer of smaller stones, mixed with lime or clay to bind and fill gaps. The nucleus, crushed gravel or sand, compacted to form a smoother surface. The summum dorsum, the top paving stones, often polygonal basalt blocks fitted tightly together. The result was a surface that could withstand centuries of use. Water drained to ditches at the sides, and raised centers allowed carts to pass without sinking into mud. Laborers on the road. Behind this precision was grueling labor. Soldiers often built roads, their discipline and manpower suited to the task. In other cases, enslaved people or local populations were conscripted. Workers dug trenches, hauled stones, leveled ground, and pounded gravel under the Mediterranean sun. The work was monotonous, repetitive, and exhausting. Imagine lifting heavy blocks, day after day, while dust rose and tools wore down. Yet this boring labor was essential. Without it, Rome could not project its armies across frontiers or bring wheat from Sicily to feed its citizens. The first great roads. Among the earliest was the Via Appia, begun in 312 BCE under the censor Appius Claudius Caecus. It stretched south from Rome toward Capua and later to Brundisium on the Adriatic. Called the Regina Viarum, the Queen of Roads, it became legendary. To walk its worn stones even centuries later was to feel the persistence of empire underfoot. Other roads followed. The Via Flaminia to the north, the Via Aurelia along the coast, and countless others across provinces. Britain, Gaul, Spain, North Africa, and the Near East all bore the imprint of Roman surveyors and laborers. By some estimates, the road system extended over 400,000 kilometers, with 80,000 of those paved. The view from a village. For the average villager, a Roman road passing nearby could be both blessing and burden. Markets grew more accessible, soldiers passed with authority, and trade increased. Yet the presence of Rome was also undeniable. Taxes, officials, and garrisons moved more easily on these stones. The road was not neutral. It was a tool of control as much as of connection. Still, for a farmer bringing produce to a market town, the improved path must have been a relief compared to muddy tracks. For a messenger hurrying with letters sealed in wax, the smooth basalt blocks meant speed and reliability. And for a traveler, weary after miles of walking, the milestones, set at regular intervals, were small comforts, marking progress through the long landscape. Roads as silent witnesses. By the late Republic, roads had become so embedded in Roman life that they were almost invisible. Everyone used them, few reflected on them. They were the silent stage on which history unfolded. Legions marching to Gaul, merchants carting olive oil, pilgrims moving toward shrines, envoys sent to distant governors. Each stone bore the wear of countless feet and wheels. Each mile connected lives across time and space. Yet, like all infrastructure, their significance was hidden in plain sight, so ordinary that it was easy to forget they were feats of engineering, sustained by centuries of labor. Closing thought. As night falls in your imagination, picture a stretch of Roman road extending into the distance. The air is quiet, broken only by the soft sound of wind across fields. The stones beneath your feet are cool, their surfaces polished by centuries of travelers. Ahead, the line continues, straight and unwavering, disappearing into shadow. And ask yourself, when those first surveyors placed their groma in the soil, could they have imagined that their straight line would endure for millennia? Couriers, inns, and the rhythm of travel. When the Romans built their roads, they did not simply think of stone and engineering. They thought of connection, how people, orders, and goods could move from one end of the empire to the other. In this section, we slow our pace to consider what life was like upon those roads, how couriers delivered messages, how travelers endured the long distances, and how infrastructure, often unglamorous, kept the empire bound together. The cursus publicus, Rome's postal system. At the heart of Rome's communication was the cursus publicus, the state-run postal service established under Emperor Augustus. It was not a service for private citizens, but for officials, military leaders, and imperial correspondents. Couriers carried letters, orders, and even intelligence reports across the empire with remarkable speed. The system relied on relay stations, known as mutations, placed every 12 to 15 miles. Here, horses could be changed and riders refreshed. At longer intervals were mansions, larger stations where travelers could rest, eat, and sometimes sleep. For the courier, the rhythm was repetitive but relentless. Ride, hand over the message, take a new horse, continue onward. By this method, a message could travel over 100 miles in a single day, far faster than any ordinary traveler. Inns along the way. For most travelers, however, journeys were far slower. Merchants, pilgrims, or soldiers on leave could not rely on the speed of the cursus publicus. Instead, they turned to inns, taverns, and rest stops. Some were official mansions, offering food and simple beds. Others were private establishments, often poorly regarded. Ancient writers complained of dirty rooms, bad wine, and dishonest innkeepers. The quality of lodging varied. In wealthier provinces, a mansion might offer clean straw mats and cooked meals. In remote areas, a traveler might sleep in a barn beside animals. Yet, for weary feet, even the roughest shelter could be a relief after miles of walking on hard stone. The pace of ordinary travel. For the average person, travel was slow. On foot, one might cover 15 to 20 miles in a day. With a mule or donkey, perhaps a little more. A well-equipped merchant with a cart might move 25 miles. Only under the postal system, with its constant relays, could the pace be truly swift. Imagine the rhythm, waking at dawn, eating a small meal of bread and olives, and setting out with the road stretching ahead. The milestones, placed every 1,000 paces, roughly 1 Roman mile, marked progress. Each stone carried inscriptions, naming the emperor under whom the road was built or repaired. They were reminders that even the smallest journey was part of something larger, the empire's grand design. Hazards along the roads. The roads were built for order, but travel was not always safe. Bandits haunted stretches of lonely countryside, especially in provinces far from Rome's control. Guards were sometimes dispatched to patrol key routes, but ordinary travelers often relied on company for protection. Weather was another challenge. Though the stone surfaces resisted mud, rain could make travel miserable, and snow in mountain passes might halt movement entirely. Heat in the Mediterranean summer could be exhausting, with little shade along the straight stretches. Still, compared to the dirt tracks of earlier centuries, Roman roads offered predictability. A traveler knew that, even if the journey was slow and uncomfortable, the path itself would endure beneath their feet. Merchants and their loads. One of the most common sights along the roads was the merchant. From carts laden with amphorae of wine to donkey trains carrying sacks of grain, trade flowed ceaselessly. Roads carried olive oil from Spain, marble from quarries in Greece, wool from Gaul, and countless other goods. Merchants often traveled in groups, partly for safety, partly for company. The road was monotonous, and long days of walking were eased by conversation. For them, the road was not just a line between towns, but the very medium of livelihood. Without it, commerce would falter. Pilgrims and religious travelers. Not all who traveled were merchants or messengers. Many walked with spiritual purpose. Temples, shrines, and healing sanctuaries dotted the empire, attracting pilgrims from far and near. Some made short journeys to local shrines. Others crossed provinces to famous destinations like Delphi or the Temple of Isis in Egypt. For these travelers, the hardship of the road was part of devotion. Each mile became an offering, each blister a sign of faith. Along the way, pilgrims might exchange stories, prayers, or charms, binding communities together not just in belief, but in shared endurance of the journey. Roads in everyday life. Though we often think of roads as used only for grand purposes, armies, governors, imperial couriers, most traffic was ordinary. Farmers carried produce to nearby markets. Families visited relatives in neighboring villages. Small traders pushed carts of pottery or tools. The road, in this sense, was like the pulse of daily life, slow, steady, constant. Every few hours another figure might appear in the distance, approach, and pass by. To walk on a Roman road was rarely to be entirely alone, yet it was also not crowded. The movement was continual but measured, like a heartbeat. The sounds of the road. Close your eyes and imagine the soundscape. The creak of cart wheels, the bray of donkeys, the crunch of sandals on gravel, the low voices of travelers speaking Latin, Greek, or local dialects. Perhaps a soldier's armor clinked faintly, or the crack of a whip urged a mule forward. It was not the roar of highways we know today, but a gentle, persistent noise, enough to remind you that you were part of something larger, moving at the same pace as countless others across the empire. The road at night. Most travelers avoided night journeys, but sometimes necessity pushed them forward. In candle or torchlight, the stones glistened faintly. The ditches on either side were pools of shadow, and the open countryside seemed vast and silent. Only the postal couriers, bound by duty, would regularly ride after dark. For ordinary travelers, the road at night was unsettling. Inns and mansions offered safety, and those too poor to afford them might rest beside the road, under stars, wrapped in cloaks. Closing thought. Think of one such traveler, a weary merchant leading a mule, the road stretching endlessly ahead. each milestone a marker of progress, but also a reminder of how far remains. His journey is neither dramatic nor heroic, yet it sustains the empire. Without his steady steps, goods would not reach markets, and families would not eat. And consider, did those who trudged mile after mile on these stones realize they were part of something so vast, or did the road simply feel like another long day's walk? Fading stones and the echoes of roads. The Roman Empire was not eternal, though its roads often seemed to be. As centuries passed, armies withdrew, governors lost power, and provinces slipped away, yet the stones beneath people's feet remained. In this final section, we linger on what became of those great arteries of empire, how they were reused, neglected, or rediscovered, and what they reveal about the endurance of ordinary labor through time. Roads after the empire. When Rome's political power fractured in the West during the 5th century, its infrastructure became less orderly. The cursus publicus collapsed, no longer funded or organized by imperial decree. Milestones were left standing, sometimes toppled for use in new walls or churches. Yet people still needed to travel. The same routes that had carried soldiers and merchants continued to carry farmers and pilgrims. A road built with deep stone foundations does not vanish simply because the empire's banners fall. Instead, it persists, slowly wearing down, stones loosening, weeds creeping in at the edges. Medieval reuse. By the early medieval centuries, many Roman roads had become the bones upon which new societies grew. Some became pilgrimage routes. The famous Via Francigena, leading from Canterbury to Rome, included stretches of old Roman pavement. Pilgrims walked on stones first laid by legionaries centuries earlier, often unaware of their true antiquity. Other roads supported the rise of medieval towns. Markets and fairs appeared where routes crossed, just as they had under Rome. Inns and taverns returned to old mansions, now rebuilt or replaced by timber halls. Even in decay, the roads shaped movement. Roads as ruins. For others, the sight of ancient roads was a reminder of Rome's vanished might. Medieval writers sometimes spoke of them with awe, as works too great to be human, attributing them to giants or ancient kings. Travelers noted how the roads were straighter and firmer than any modern paths, marveling at how such labor could have been done without the machines of later ages. In truth, the secret was not magic, but patience. Thousands of workers laying stone upon stone, year after year, mile after mile. The road's endurance was testimony to long hours of ordinary labor. Forgotten milestones. Milestones, once sharp markers of distance, slowly lost their meaning. Inscriptions faded, the Latin unreadable to local villagers. Some stones were reused as building material. Others lay half-buried, mistaken for natural rocks. A few survived, and in them modern historians read names of emperors, dates of construction, and traces of ancient bureaucracy. Imagine passing such a stone in the 9th century. The letters faint, the name of a long-dead Caesar still visible, a ghost of empire standing by the roadside. Few would stop, but those who noticed might wonder at the enormity of what had once been. Trade and the persistence of routes. Even after the empire's fall, the movement of goods persisted. Roads connected producers with markets, towns with ports, farmers with buyers. Where the stones crumbled, dirt tracks followed the same lines. Geography, once mapped so carefully by Rome, remained persuasive. The easiest passes, the most direct valleys, the firmest ground, all still guided human movement. Thus, in a quiet sense, Rome's roads never truly disappeared. They were absorbed into Europe's later maps, sometimes resurfaced, sometimes buried beneath new layers of soil and cobblestones. The symbol of the road. For centuries after Rome's fall, the phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," carried symbolic weight. It meant not only physical routes converging on the city, but the idea of a world connected by a single center. Even when Rome no longer ruled the Mediterranean, its roads remained a metaphor for unity, direction, and the inevitable pull of history. To walk upon a Roman road in the Middle Ages was, knowingly or not, to walk upon the empire's shadow. Roads rediscovered. By the Renaissance, scholars and travelers began to notice and record these old routes more systematically. Antiquarians mapped them, engineers studied their construction, and states sometimes sought to repair or imitate them. In Britain, Italy, and France, portions of Roman roads were re-exposed, their straight lines guiding new highways. In the 18th and 19th centuries, travelers on the Grand Tour often remarked upon walking on the very stones of Rome. What had once been a dull, ordinary part of daily life was now a subject of historical curiosity, the quiet human legacy. Behind the grandeur of Roman roads lies a quieter truth. They were built not by emperors, but by countless unnamed workers. Soldiers dug ditches, peasants hauled gravel, and local communities were taxed or conscripted to maintain them. For these people, the road was not a monument, but a burden of labor. And yet, it was their sweat and persistence that made the roads endure beyond the empire itself. The glory of Rome was written not only in marble arches and imperial decrees, but in the countless stones laid by hands now forgotten. Reflection. Consider how a Roman road appears today, often a grassy path, lined with uneven stones, leading through quiet fields or forests. Travelers walk for leisure, unaware of the centuries of feet that came before. The road no longer carries armies or imperial messages, but it still carries memory. The endurance of Rome's roads is not just about engineering, but about continuity. They remind us that history is not only sudden events and battles, but also the long, slow persistence of human effort. Closing thought. So, when you think of Rome, do you imagine its emperors, its battles, its spectacles? Or do you imagine the slow, steady roads, stretching across hills and valleys, still faintly visible after 2,000 years? And perhaps the deeper question is this: if even the mightiest empire fades, yet its ordinary stones remain, what does that tell us about what truly lasts in human history?